want to get into the computer business. A word that you own in the mind. You ever consider the possibility that just, mental weakens you. Toy business in America. In the industrial field, one of your problems with a second brand or a third brand is, in some cases, as you just said, all the personal computer manufacturers. You think this was successful? So the meeting was to discuss how to market a word that you own in the mind. I'm Ries, and I'm a marketing consultant from New York. I'm here to talk about marketing. What is marketing? Fundamentally, marketing is building a brand inside the mind of the customer or prospect. How do you build a brand? Well, you do it with advertising and communications. But there's a big change taking place in how you advertise and communicate. You see, it used to be that you looked at your product or service, you looked for features, benefits, and then you advertised those features or benefits. But the problem is, there's just too much advertising out there. And people would ignore what your message is. What is positioning? Positioning is a new way to look at the function of advertising. 24 years ago, Jack Trout and I wrote an article for Advertising Age magazine called "The Positioning Era Cometh." Since then, positioning has become a buzzword in advertising and marketing circles around the world. What is positioning? Actually, it's a very simple idea. It's based on this principle, that most advertising is conceived to be communications. People look at themselves, they look at their products, they figure out what they want to say, and then they communicate those ideas with customers or prospects. That's the communication formula that used to be used by most advertisers. We said, look, the problem with that formula is that we live in an over-communicated society. There are just too many messages out there. If you don't tune your message to the mind of the customer or prospect, you're not going to get into the mind. See, positioning as a concept starts with the mind of the customer or prospect. You look for holes in that mind, and then you run advertising and marketing programs designed to fill a hole in the mind. That is the fundamental concept of positioning, and we think that it can be a very powerful tool to help you make more effective advertising and marketing programs. The concept of positioning is 24 years old. In those years, we've developed our ideas into some basic laws of marketing. So I thought you might be interested in what the laws of marketing are. It's better to be first than it is to be better. Now that might sound strange, but let me demonstrate the power of being first. Let me ask you a question. What's the name of the first person to fly solo across the North Atlantic? Not a trick question. You all know that's Charles Lindbergh, right? Charles Lindbergh. Now, what's the name of the second person to fly solo across the North Atlantic? Not too easy to answer, is it? Happens to be a man named Bert Hinkler. Bert was a better pilot, he flew faster, he consumed less fuel. But who's ever heard of Bert Hinkler? He left home, and his mother hasn't heard from him since. Come on, Bert, call home. Your mother's getting worried. How about this? What's the name of the first sea captain to make a voyage to America? Of course, that's Christopher Columbus. Everybody knows that. What's the name of the second? Who knows? Lost in history. The same thing is true of products. What's the largest cola? Coca-Cola. What's the first rent-a-car service? Hertz. What's the largest rent-a-car service? Hertz. What's the first tissue? Kleenex. What's the largest tissue? Kleenex. You see, the leader, the largest selling brand in virtually every category is Charles Lindbergh, the first. It's better to be first than it is to be better. What's the name of the first college founded in America? You're probably thinking there are 2,500 colleges and universities in America. How would I know who's first? But you do. You see, all you have to do is ask yourself, who's the most famous? And of course, you have to admit, it's Harvard. Harvard was the first college founded in America. What's the name of the second? It's not Bert Hinkler University, no. It's William and Mary. Nice place, but not exactly in the same category as Harvard. What's the name of the first champagne? Dom Perignon. Dom Perignon is the Harvard of champagne. If you want to be a leader, if you want to be rich and famous and successful, it's better to be first than it is to be better. That's the law of leadership. Let's ask another question. What's the name of the third person to fly the Atlantic Ocean solo? You're probably thinking, if I didn't know the name of the second, how am I going to know the name of the third? But of course you do, because the third person was Amelia Earhart. Oh, now, is Amelia known as the third person to fly the Atlantic Ocean solo? No. She's known as the first woman to do it. Now you know one of the most important laws of marketing. If you can't be first, then you set up a new category you can be first in. Let's talk about a few examples of how you set up a new category. Take beer, for example. Heineken's was the first high-priced imported beer. They were first in the category. So what did the people at Anheuser-Busch do? They set up the first high-priced domestic beer, a brand called Michelob. And today Michelob outsells Heineken's 2-to-1 in the United States. The first light beer in America was Miller Lite. And so what is the leading light beer? It's Miller Lite. Now, it took an importer 5 years to say, hey, if there's a market for a domestic light beer, maybe there's a market for an imported light beer. And they introduced Amstel Light, the first imported light beer. And of course, it's the #1 brand of imported light beer. Now, not just beer and cola, but think about computers. The first computer was IBM. And 7 major American companies went head-to-head with IBM trying to make a better computer. Most of them lost hundreds of millions of dollars. One company, the Digital Equipment Corporation, thought like Amelia Earhart. They introduced the first mini computer. And Digital became a $14 billion company, the second largest computer company in the world. And then a company called Tandem invented the fault-tolerant computer. And Tandem became a $2 billion company. And then a company called Stratus invented the fault-tolerant mini computer. And Stratus became a $500 million company. And then, of course, there's Cray. Cray introduced the first supercomputer. And Cray became a $1 billion company. Now, think about this. Cray could have said, we have a more powerful mainframe. But if they did that, people would have thought, well, IBM makes mainframes. They're going to make a more powerful mainframe any day now. I'll wait for IBM. It's very important to set up the category supercomputer. And then a company called Convex introduced the mini supercomputer. Hey, this is a company that was bought last year by Hewlett-Packard for $150 million. The principles or laws of marketing are very, very simple. Not always easy to execute in practice, but they're very simple. Now, when you set up a category, it doesn't have to be complicated. It's very easy today to set up a new category, but you know what? Most companies don't want to do that. They're looking for ways to introduce better products. The key question to ask yourself when you have a new product is, first what? Try to invent a category. Marketing today is more a battle of category than it is a battle of brands. That's the law of the category. The next law is the law of the mind. It's better to be first in the mind than it is to be first in the marketplace. See, now it gets a little more difficult. It's not enough just to introduce the first product in a category. It's not enough to set up a new category you can be first in. You got to use this in order to get in the mind first. For example, the first commercial computer was not IBM. It was Sperry Rand's Univac. But you see, they didn't mount a massive marketing program like IBM did. IBM put all their resources into the commercial computer, and they won the battle for the mind. They got in the mind first. The same thing is true of personal computers. The first personal computer was the MITS Altair 8800. Who's ever heard of MITS Altair 8800? I mean, that product is just as famous as Bert Hinkler. Nowhere. Who got in the mind first? Apple. Apple got in the mind first, and people think that Apple was the first personal computer. Not true. Now think about the word Apple as opposed to the name MITS Altair 8800. Apple is a nice, simple, easy name to remember. If you want to get in the mind first, you have to do the same thing. You have to have a nice, simple, easy name to remember. That's the law of the mind. Now, there's a lesson here. It's not necessary to invent everything. However, if you have the resources, you move rapidly enough, you can dominate a market by getting into the mind first. It is very, very important to your success to be first in the mind of the customer or prospect. That's one of the key essences of success in business today. The next law is related to the law of the mind. It's the law of perception. Marketing is not a battle of products. It's a battle of perceptions inside the mind of the customer or prospect. Let me give you an example. Take automobiles. Most people think when you sell an automobile, it's horsepower, styling, and whatever. Not necessarily true. You have to think about the perceptions of the car inside the mind. Take an example, the Japanese imported cars in America. Now, in the United States, the largest selling Japanese imported car is Honda. Number 2 is Toyota. Number 3 is Nissan. Now, in Japan, they sell exactly the same cars. You would think, would you not, if marketing were a battle of products, that the sales order in Japan would be at least similar to the sales order in the United States, but it's not. In Japan, Toyota is number 1, and Honda is number 3. In Japan, Toyota outsells Honda more than 4-1. The cars are the same, but the minds are different. If I walked into my office in New York and told my daughter I bought a Honda, she'd say, "Dad, what kind of a Honda did you get? Did you get the 2-door, the 4-door? Did you get the hatchback?" If I lived in Tokyo and walked into the office and told my associates I bought a Honda, they would say to me, "Al, what kind of a motorcycle did you buy?" Because you see, in Japan, when you say Honda, you think motorcycle. So why would you buy an automobile from a motorcycle company? That doesn't fit the perception of Honda in the mind. Take another example, Coca-Cola. As you may know, a number of years ago, Coke introduced a better tasting product called New Coke. How do we know it was better tasting? Because the Coca-Cola company did 200,000 taste tests, and they proved that New Coke tastes better than Pepsi, and Pepsi tastes better than the original formula, now called Coca-Cola Classic. So what is winning the battle? Is it the best tasting cola? No. New Coke, the best tasting cola, is number 3 in sales. And the regular Coca-Cola, the old formula, now called Coca-Cola Classic, is number 1 in sales. Why is that? Well, think about it. The can says New Coke. People look at that and say, they changed the formula. I'm not going to like the taste of that. So you taste it and say, I don't like the taste. The mind tells the mouth what something ought to taste like. Perception is critical in marketing. It's perception. You have to match what's in the mind if you want to be successful.